Yes, it's finally time. The end of year list that everyone always agrees with. Of course, I'm talking about the 10 worst hit rap songs of the year. This one focusing on 2018 because that's the year. That's what year it is. It was a pretty great year for hip hop, but some bad rap songs still managed to sneak their way onto the charts, so those are the songs we're going to be focusing on today. Just keep in mind that for songs to be eligible for this list, they have to have charted on the Billboard Hot 100 at some point. With that being said, the 10 best hit rap songs of 2018 video will be linked below. I just uploaded that one. And make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so that there's a very slim chance that YouTube will actually notify you when I upload my worst and best albums of the year lists. And another alternative to, keeping up with that is just follow me on Twitter. Whenever I post a video, you'll hear about it on there, and their notifications actually work. So with that being said, this is CDTVProductions, and let's take a look at the 10 worst hit rap songs of 2018.
Bitch, are you dumb, dum, 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 stupid? Bitch, I'm the cannon with this drum, 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 drum. Pull over, send me no Lil Pump, pump.
Look, even though tracks like Gotti or Fifi are technically bad songs, I still enjoyed the way 6ix9ine kind of experimented with different sounds on them in some aspects. Whether it was something as simple as laughing at his auto-tuned vocals on Gotti, or reluctantly singing along to the verses of Fifi, which are catchy no matter how lazy they are, they at least had an appeal to me in some way. And then 6ix9ine would just come back after those songs to make another standard shout rap track about killing people with Stupid. It just felt like the same thing we've already heard from 6ix9ine numerous times, but with a beat that isn't as hard as ones he's previously used. The best quality of the track was the short verse from Bobby Shmurda, which we didn't even get to hear in all its glory because it was recorded through a prison phone.
Get me naked till I burst out. She used to teach, she get cursed out. And all these suckers with their fucking feelings always daddy bitches with their purse out.
Kind of prophetic hearing that on a 6ix9ine track now that I think about it. He's definitely a bit more self-aware on here than on his older singles, but as a whole, it's just not a track that I enjoy.
Don't do bleed just, pocket splitters, bitch don't think I'm ready, you got that swag, you got that salt, then sell it, free my niggas.
This is a pretty weak track, and I dislike it even more for what it represents. This was the first single the Migos released in 2018, and it really was foreshadowing for how the year would turn out for their music. The song really doesn't need to be near 5 minutes long, just like we didn't need a 24-track album, along with solo albums from Takeoff and Quavo this year. And it's so repetitive and drawn out, much like the Culture 2 album it comes from, and Quavo's album. This basically marked the real starting point of the Migos oversaturation that just came into full effect this year. And that's a shame because they have a lot of music that I love, but I'm just getting bored of it so fast because it's honestly just too much at this point. It also doesn't help that the first 2 minutes of this track is Quavo delivering his auto-tune vocals in a way that barely changes up for the whole time he raps.
Chats and goals, rock the shows, big bang rolls, cash. Now she go,
The Offset verse is probably the best thing on this track, but it's a struggle to not lose interest by the time he appears. Just a pretty unnecessary song, and not a great choice for a single at all.
Only way to sound is skid it. Hopping out the rave and skid it. Smashing on a bitch and skid it. Run to the chair with no limit. Popping on X, popping on X, popping on.
Lil Pump dropped quite a few entertaining songs in 2018, but this wasn't one of them. The beat is kind of similar to the ones found on his songs Crazy and Boss, but the main melody on this beat just sounds almost untuned and very cheap. As for Lil Pump himself, for some reason I just feel like this track lacks the dumb fun factor that songs like Drug Addicts have, and we didn't get that energetic sound from him either on here. Also, I probably shouldn't let this impact my enjoyment as much as it did, but the fact the second verse got recycled by Pump for his XXL freestyle annoyed me so much that I actually like the verse less within the song now. That made me retroactively dislike a verse that I kind of enjoyed in the first place. I was hoping we'd get something a little more interesting for a single based around Pump's most popular catchphrase. Instead, we got his worst single of 2018.
Don't need a big speech, we made the biggest impact, check the spreadsheet. That's Lil Weezy, the Barbie, and Drizzy Drake. Niggas getting more cheese, kissy face.
Now, Nicki Minaj has a tendency to switch between various eccentric deliveries numerous times within her songs, and that's something I actually respect quite a lot because it shows that she's actually trying with her vocals. She's trying new stuff out, and no matter what, it at least always keeps the tracks interesting. But a few times this can result in some very irritating sounds, and that is the case with quite a few segments on here.
I'm still fly, just bag the white guy. Bad bitch, fuck the bitch. Bitch get slick, I'ma cut the bitch.
Kinda makes it a little bit harder to listen to. It's also not ideal that this track instantly kicks off with a very weak line, one that I would consider to be overused at this point, and Nicki didn't do anything creative with the wordplay, she just said the overused line. On top of that, it seems like the typical Nicki Minaj topics recycled over a new beat, a beat which has such an awkwardly claustrophobic drum pattern. She's better than every other female at everything, other female rappers try and copy her style, name dropping her Young Money label mates, you know, the same stuff she's been saying on a lot of her big singles for literal years. I'll give her props for Chun-Li, which she dropped alongside this song, because that track is hard, but Barbie Tingz was the significantly weaker one out of the two. Hearing YG intimately rap into my ears about designer bags and ass in the most repetitive way possible, it really isn't that high on my wish list, so this one was doomed from the start. Repetition isn't always an issue for me, but just look at that hook, my god. What's the bets on how long it took him to craft this Shakespearean poem? Now, I came out of 2018 liking Cardi's music way more than when I went into it. There's a lot of tracks I really like on her new album, but this is one of her weaker performances, pretty much just elaborating very slightly on the very original topics YG mentions on his hook, dropping in some basic similes, and talking about how she's apparently evolved because she licks balls now? Okay. Fairly lackluster verses from Cardi, and a hook that, quite frankly, makes me uncomfortable from YG is not the best combination.
Working me, she working me, urging me, it be urging me. Chill it up, the top and close the curtain, please.
Okay, so this was one of the first singles that Quavo dropped to promote his then upcoming solo album, so surely he'd want to use this track to show us what was different about his solo music from a typical Migos track.
Pockets real fat, cash real 10 a key.
Okay, Quavo, he's a very rich guy, so I guess it's alright if he reminds us about it quite often. I'll give him a pass, you know, as long as the rest of the track is pretty different to his usual stuff.
Serve a fiend, fuck a bitch and go to sleep.
Okay, selling drugs and having sex, I guess I could have expected that.
If you want smoke, smoke alarm me. Smoke. By yourself, no, burn your arm me. Come and get it. I'm having shit that gonna stink your whole family.
Alright, I'm lost.
Why does this need to exist?
This is just a typical Migos song without the two most interesting elements of a typical Migos song. Also, this track, or at least just the hook, is about a girl seducing Quavo, so when he says this...
She hurting me, rich Don Hercules, hurting me.
Is he referring to her handjobs being so aggressive that it actually causes him physical pain? Either Quavo changed the subject to him or his girl whipping up drugs, therefore, you know, strong wrist, with no context or no reason to change up the subject, or he needs to ask this girl to slow down because that doesn't sound desirable at all. If I'm being honest, all this track really did for me was enforce all the reasons why I didn't want a Quavo solo album to exist.
Christian Dior, I buy shit. Shawty gon' fuck on my drip. Yeah, Shawty in love with my drip. Bro, I get that drip, you get drip. Yeah, 220 on that rip.
Now, I definitely wouldn't say I'm biased against Playboi Carti, it's just I heavily dislike 90% of what he's put out. So, as you can imagine, him handling most of this song is a bit of an issue for me, especially when it sounds so similar to almost every other verse he's dropped, with half-rapped bars and excessive ad-libs. It's his style, sure, but it's a style that I'm not fond of in the slightest. The beat on this one was interesting at first. I love that synth sound that just sounds like it's kind of zipping back and forth, but it doesn't really go anywhere too exciting after that, and just pretty much stays the same the whole way through the song. Then Yachty comes in with a very mild verse that doesn't help improve the track much at all. I thought the Nothing to Prove album was quite nice, but this one, it certainly wasn't one of its highlights.
Can't go 50-50 with no hope. Every month, I'm supposed to pay her bills and get her what she want.
Drake just naturally has a pretty monotone voice, one that can be very boring to listen to at times, so why the hell he made the decision to rap over a beat that sounds so dead and vacant is beyond me. I mean, that's pretty much all of the Scorpion album, but this was the worst example of it. I don't think I can find one exciting element of this song. Not even one. Drake's flow? It barely changes. Drake's delivery stays monotone for the entire thing. The beat is barren and bland. Nothing about this is attention grabbing. It's just also unfortunately ironic that Drake drops a track talking about not wanting to get married so he won't lose money to the woman if she divorces him, with him also specifically mentioning child support at one point in the song. Then, literally a few days later, Pusha T dropped The Story of Adidon, the diss track which revealed Drake's secret child with a porn star. Like I said, unfortunate timing. Easily one of the most boring Drake tracks I've heard in a while, and possibly one of the most dry sounding ones he has ever dropped.
I don't got much self-control, I hope that you run it. I'm not a cheater, but if I'ma be accused, might as well be. You tell me you'll take me back when hell freezes, but females be.
I really wish Eminem could have avoided this list, because in my opinion, Kamikaze really was a great return to form for him, and I'm glad that I enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm even actually wearing the official Kamikaze merch right now. But yeah, that album kind of started to trail off towards the end. And with this track, it pretty much just slingshotted itself way out of bounds, with one of the ugliest sounding tracks M has dropped maybe ever? And look, ugly sounding tracks can work. I feel like Tyler the Creator in particular has a knack for making tracks with loads of unpleasant elements sound appealing. But this one doesn't do that. One of the most unappealing parts of this song is Jessie Reyez. I am not familiar with her music, but my god, her voice is not easy to listen to at all on this one.
You go back home, right?
She produces such an ear-piercing sound, and surprisingly that's not that fun to listen to. And I don't really know if this description makes sense, but the beat on this one sounds like it's dying. The way the 808s kind of stretch out and slow down, it makes it sound like they're fading away on life support. Eminem is whatever. His second verse kinda picks up towards the end before it abruptly cuts off, but we still have really awkward sounding parts on his first verse, and that thing he does where he really over-accentuates some decent wordplay, which makes the line sound way more cringy than it should.
Like my monthly bill from Sprint, they're charging me for a selfie. Charging me.
That wordplay was okay. The delivery wasn't. I get that it having this ugly sound is probably intentional to really reflect this dysfunctional relationship angle, but the intention doesn't make it any better in this case.
I got cars, I got bags, I got real estate. For play, I ain't come to play. I got big fish.
Now, I have to commend Tyga and Iggy Azalea for just clawing their way out of the hip-hop career graveyard this year. Tyga much more so, but I don't feel like it made for a very good combination when they joined forces. Who would have guessed it? I have to say, this is the most horrendous use of a Wu-Tang Clan sample I have ever heard in my life. The message of the song Kream by Wu-Tang is essentially that money is a powerful thing and the root of all evil. This song, which keep in mind uses that as a sample, is a song glorifying excessive sex and being rich. Look, don't try and take that classic rap song to the hip-hop graveyard with you. Just let us keep it, please. It's fine being remembered as a rap classic. Then there's the hook on this thing, which is just brutally awful. It's such a nothing hook. Like, Iggy really just gave up on rapping generic sentences for a hook, and instead just randomly fires out single words that reflect the track's themes, while Tyga just repeats the same thing over and over and over in the background.
Get it, 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 get it.
They even somehow managed to pull one of the most lifeless and boring beats out of Ronnie J, who is usually a very solid producer and gave us some of the best rap beats this year. It just felt like no one cared with this. I would be so happy if I never had to hear this again. I might just get someone else to edit this video so I don't have to hear it again during the editing process when I'm putting all the clips in. If this song ever plays when I'm at a club, I'm leaving. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm quite literally not joking when I say this. There is not a single redeemable element of this song, and that That Is Why Kream by Iggy Azalea featuring Tyga is, in my opinion, the worst hit rap song of 2018, and unfortunately it was a hit. Just very narrowly was a hit. Well, that is going to be it for the video today. Thank you so much for watching, guys. The worst hit rap songs lists are always pretty much my favourite end of year lists because they do spark quite a bit of a discussion. But yeah, these ones always do well, so I'm very excited to put this out, and I'm very excited to see what you guys think of it. So let me know down in the comments below what you think about my list and what your own personal list looks like. If you think there's any particular songs I missed out on this list. And yeah, that's all I have to say, so thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed, turn on notifications so you don't miss out on my future uploads. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram under the name CDTVProductions. That's all I got to say for today, guys. This is your boy, CDTV Productions, signing out.